I certainly say, Madam Speaker, and I think Oregonians will agree with me.
Political bodies exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the...
All right. Everybody, welcome to the Oregon Discussion. I'm Jeff Helfrich, State Representative for House District 52. But today I have got Representative Alex Skarlatos. Alex, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Senator Thatcher, how are you doing?
You just don't think about it too hard. Great.
If you don't think it's going to hurt, right? If it doesn't. So what do you got going on?
Hey, yeah, Ben got a slideshow for us today talking about public safety in our discussion of government efficiency.
Public safety in discussion. There we go. Senator Thatcher, you are the vice chair of Judiciary in the Senate. So if people don't know what that actually means, why don't you give us a quick 10-second overview what that actually does and what you're able to accomplish in that? Because I know your chair is a little on the different side sometimes. So.
You know, it's more of a title than anything else. In reality, there aren't very many opportunities to actually take the gavel when he is gone, because he'll just cancel the committee and yeah.
What? That's robbing you of
But that
the
is
gavel?
generally what a vice chair could do. They could take over the committee if the chair is not there for whatever reason. And then you do get to have vice chair meetings to decide, to be told what's going to be, how are you going to get run over.
That's kind of what happens when you're in the minority party.
Yeah.
You're just going to get run over. You're kind of like left with these, but you guys do a really good job in the Senate on trying to stopping bad policies, because you got good committee members that'll ask really probing questions and kind of stop trying to fix stupid, right? Going to try to fix some stupid stuff. Like, what committees are you on?
I'm on General Government, Veterans, Emergency Management, and then I'm also on the other one, Economic Development and Trade, and then I'm on the subcommittee for Trade and Economic Development.
So
Ways and Means subcommittee.
So if people don't recognize Alec, I'm next to somebody that's kind of famous, little train thing in France and all that, and you stopped the terrorist threat, and it was pretty cool to be a part of it. Just talk to you about that and kind of where you're at. And it's just these interesting times. Never thought I'd been sitting next to you and having a podcast with you and talking about stuff. It's pretty neat to how all our lives got us to a point in here where we're actually trying to make Oregon better.
Yeah, and did the movie with Clint Eastwood and wrote a book, and now I'm in your basement. So my stock is up.
Yeah. The basement, man. Come on.
Perfect.
All right, Ben, let's get this thing going.
You got it. So we love to start our DOGE episode with a game, and we call this one, Where Does Oregon Rank? And so I'm going to ask y'all a couple questions, and we're going to see in the ranking of the states, number 1 being the best, 50th being the worst. Where does Oregon rank? And so our first one, where does Oregon rank in number of registered sex offenders per 100,000 people? And number 1 is going to be with the highest, most probable ones. 50 is going to be in low, not too many.
Okay.
You said
there's a little different for each
higher.
one.
You said higher was best. I don't think having the most number of sex
No.
offenders is the best.
Each one's a little different,
Okay.
actually. But yeah, good point.
So the smaller numbers, like if you're number 1, that's not a good place to
That's
be.
not a great place to be on.
So I think we're probably number 1 then, if I had to guess.
I for sure in the top 10.
I'll give you 6.
All right, there we go. We are number 1 with 750 per 100,000. The national average is 231 per 100,000.
So I want to stop that just for a quick second. So my career in law enforcement, 25 and a half years with the city of Portland, and I've had different people on my podcast I have, but I think the reason why we're number 1 is because people don't really take serious human trafficking. There are more strip clubs in the city of Portland than anywhere else, in Oregon, but it's high concentration of that. And I don't think people realize the sex trade and sex trafficking that happens in there.
Well, I mean, not only are we number 1, but we're 3 times the national average. That's insane.
Yeah.
Well, we have that very strong First Amendment, freedom of expression, which includes all the things that contribute to all the proliferation of the strip clubs, et cetera.
So you just talked about that. Kim, you've been around in the Senate, and you've seen a lot of different stupid bills, right? Life's hard, and it's even harder if you're being stupid about stuff. And I see a lot of stupid things on the street with people doing. But what have you seen? Have you seen any bills or any attempt to decriminalize prostitution?
Yes.
Talk about that for a second, because that plays right into that.
In fact, I think it was in the last long session where they were trying to do that. Because the selling point or the hook was, then you won't be penalizing these young people who are being trafficked, and they won't have to go through the trauma of, an arrest and being humiliated and put in jail, whatever. And the other side of that is, how are you going to interrupt that? How are you going to disrupt that poor young person having to be trafficked? How are you going to disrupt that? Take them into custody and hopefully get them out of that situation. And that, I don't think, would happen if you decriminalized.
Who wrote the bill? Name names.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
It was
but
somebody in our chamber.
yeah.
It was somebody in our chamber.
Not in our caucus.
Not in our no, not our, on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
That one was.
Yeah.
You say that, and I remember the training we got, and we'd see that on East 2nd Avenue, the prostitution stuff, where you had some of these young girls that we called them popcorn pimps. These guys that they didn't have father figures in their lives. Something was going wrong, and they said they'll treat them well, and they kind of kept them going down this road. They got them sex trafficked, and the next thing you know, they're getting shipped across the nation. It's just heartbreaking. And you think people it's okay to decriminalize that? We have to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
It just, man. Anyway, all right. We'll get back on track. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Now we got our next one. Where does Oregon rank in violent crime rates per 100,000 people?
I'll let you take that one, Kim.
Whew. Well, I won't try to take the first 10 numbers this time, but I definitely think it is the top 10. I'll just say second.
I'll go with, I can think of a couple other places in our country that's probably a little bit more violent than Oregon. But I think we're still top 10. So I'll go 9.
I know what the number one place is, the violent crime. But I will say probably 4.
Okay, we got them locked in. We rank 7th.
Okay.
Yeah.
With
We
roughly,
had it surrounded.
yeah, pretty right there. Nearly 3,000 violent crimes per 100,000. And so that's a pretty staggering number.
You know what the number one is?
No,
Chicago.
that does make sense.
I
Yeah.
figured.
That is, there's this thing, there's this website, it's heyjackass.com. It'll show you how many people are shot, where they're shot at, how many people have died, and how many up to date within an hour of all these crimes. There's an actual website that does that. And it's like, really? And they think it's okay to do that in Chicago. It's just so horrible.
Do we have a sidekick on this podcast that can Google where we would rank if we lost Portland Metro?
Yeah.
Oh,
'Cause I'd be very curious to see that.
That
I don't know
maybe
how
we
you could pull that out, but yeah.
stick that in show notes or something.
I tell you,
there you go. Put that in the
tell you,
comments.
Salem's wanting to copy Portland in a lot of ways, and I looked at a ranking earlier. I can't remember the site it was on. It ranked Portland at 93%, at like really high chance of crime, and then Salem was 86%. Not too far behind for being such a small city, really.
Oh, we just had that large fentanyl dealer busted here too. So it's moving down to Salem for sure.
I think it's always been around. It's just those levels of dealers. If you're in that high level in an organization like that, you don't have the drug around you, but you'll have cash, you'll have the cars like they're there. But what's lost in that is that 46 pounds of powder fentanyl that was seized in Portland, and with the illegal aliens that were there. And that's going to kind of talk about, we're talking about sanctuary cities and how Portland's just trying to protect things instead of doing what they need to do right. So, all right, we're getting ahead of the episode, so let's keep it going.
Right.
Sorry,
we'll
man.
get there.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Helfrich, this one will be near and dear to your heart. Where does Oregon rank in numbers of law enforcement per 100,000 people? So now we're kind of inverse now.
It's 2.1 officers per 100,000.
Yeah. So then if you think that's high or low, then you'd rank it, 49th or 48th. It's kind of inverse.
It's low. I think we're ranked probably 42nd in the nation.
42nd, okay.
I actually heard this statistic, but it's old. 5 years ago, at least, we were the least police state in the country. So I think we're still, I'd say we're still 50.
I'm guessing 49.
Okay, good guesses. We are 49.
Ooh, ding, ding, ding.
Got 301 law enforcement per 100,000. We threw on one bonus one for the representative. Where does Oregon rank in number of state troopers per 100,000?
Are we 50 in that one? Can we be 50 in that one?
No, we're down. I think, what was the stat when I'm on Public Safety Ways and Means Subcommittee, and what were they talking? We were at, I'll say 43.
Mm-hmm. Any other guesses?
I'm still saying 50.
50.
I'll say 48th.
Okay. We're 49th.
Why would you repeat the same question if we're 49th in both?
Yeah.
Come on.
That's
State
keeping you on
troopers and
your
law
toes.
enforcement,
Not
right?
any, I mean, it's still law enforcement.
It is a piece of it, but that also includes all the
That's a
shit.
trick question.
No, it's not a trick question, because if your state agency, your state police can't be, at the top tier of that, they're drug trafficking, human trafficking, all those things like that are affected on the highways and stuff like that. And your car,
They still count as law enforcement.
oh, come on. I'll argue that all day long with you.
Your bonus question should have been, where do we rank for mental health care? and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that?
We've covered that one.
47th.
It's not great for
Not
sure.
great.
Well, so moving on, this one, we're going to start talking about some of the cartel activity in Oregon that we've kind of hinted at
You
already.
jumped
in the
ahead.
pod.
Did you see these slides ahead of time?
No.
Yeah.
Sure. No.
But so this
I've
was...
got a man on the inside.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I
rough
know what these
story.
If I saw the slides, I would have gotten those answers correct.
Yeah, there you go. But this is a story from 2023, and it was highlighting how there's a strong presence of cartel activity in our state, and even how it's not just Oregon experiencing Mexican cartels that are kind of, gotten the press now that they're frequent in southern Oregon, but spread out throughout the whole state. And there's also Chinese and Russian drug cartels as well. And, they've flourished here, really, and been illegal marijuana outdoor farms since 2020, and are adapting to the pressures on them as they begin to mount as U.S. law enforcement's shown and try to bring the pressure here. So curious what you all think about that.
I'll just say cartel activity in Oregon is not recent. It's been around since I've lived in Salem. Gangs have been a big thing. Those transnational criminal organizations, we've been tracking them down. In fact, when we were talking about the Real ID Act back in 2005 in Oregon, that was one of the things that we were talking about, where it would help prevent people from hiding out in plain sight if we had Real ID. I mean, that was one of the talking points for adopting that measure. I mean, obviously it took a long time for it to actually come to fruition, but anyhow, whatever you feel like that, and not also not giving licenses to people here, not legally, and then you know how all that turned out.
I was 18 when we voted on that, too. For the driver's
Yeah, it was.
license.
Yeah, are you talking about the people of Oregon
Yeah.
resoundingly rejecting it, and then the legislature turning around the next long session? I think you're right. I think you're about right.
Yep, that's what it was. I remember that because we were all like, no.
Yep, and then they turned around and just did it anyway.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
I mean, we've seen that a ton in Southern Oregon. I mean, especially with that picture that's showing with all the torn down marijuana grows, that has exploded since about 2018, 2019 in Southern Oregon. Now it's actually on the way back down a little bit, but that's been a huge issue, just the actual growing of marijuana in Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And the slavery that accompanies it.
Yeah. Human trafficking. Yep. Not so much sex trafficking. So the perspective I have on this, when, Kim, you talked about it, was it's been around with the gangs, and it really did. There's different gang sects, and I don't want to get into all the different ones, but you had the Blood and Crips that came out of California. You had the Kings, the three Kings that came out of Chicago, and they all kind of came together at a point in the late 80s, early 90s, and kind of had this truce, if you will, that divided the country up into sectors in which this is where they're going to do their operations, selling drugs, prostitution, running guns. And when the gangs, the Bloods and Crips out of LA, and you had the Norteños and Sureños, so the Hispanic gangs, the black gangs, all these things, they divided up and they started battling with each other and trying to get these different parts of the nation. But the I-5 corridors where the drug trafficking has come from. And it's just not from the south, it's from the north too, coming out of Canada, because that's an open border. And I think it's just evolved into what you see now coming out of Mexico, because they've kind of pushed the war on drugs and the RICO Act, all those things, those tools that we used in law enforcement worked. And so that just pushed them down south, and they kind of came up and figured out how to keep a lower profile. But the drugs and the drug trafficking has been around forever, but now it's just more organized, and it's at a international level. And there's a lot of money involved, a lot of money, and a lot of players are getting money off of stuff. And it's just incredible. It's just sad. But I think where we failed when you talk about the marijuana is when we decriminalized marijuana for small possession. And that's when I think you saw in the 90s, even though possession of a cigarette, a marijuana cigarette, whatever, but when they started going down that route, that is when you saw the floodgates open for us. And they said, oh, we're going to decriminalize drugs eventually. No, you won't. And look what happened to 110. Really? Drug policy. Thank you so much for that, George Soros. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, this one as a slide I thought was very interesting, and this one is one from the Oregonians, a snapshot of current and former drug trafficking organizations in Oregon, and so you can see a breakdown of counties and how frequent and what percentages of international, multi-state.
That's what I appreciate, though. Douglas County. Say what you want about Douglas County and our crime, but all of our gangs are local. We don't allow any international crime in Douglas County. We keep it local. We are America first.
Just Mary County's the opposite.
That on the record. Yeah, exactly.
We're multi-state and international.
You got to figure that one out. Got to get your local gang numbers back up.
I'm not surprised about where Multnomah County's at. You would figure Jackson County because they're right on the border, right along I-5. That makes sense. But number two, I was kind of surprised with Deschutes County.
Well,
yeah, what's going on there?
So I can speak to that. I have a slide. I'm from Deschutes County, and there's definitely been.
What's wrong with your people?
Well, there's a lot of places to go grow it out there, and I think as Highway 97 moves up, it's an alternative. I think the I-5 policing and patrol probably created a lot of pressure to move to a different part of the state, and that's another route that goes through it, and so that's probably a way to funnel it and move it there. And then there's a ton of open public land out there that has lots of trails and easy to go out there and accessible, but still far away enough that you go out there and put it out there. I mean, we've heard law enforcement talk about the problems with siphoning water and that impacting our farmers and things like that.
I remember we do a lot of elk hunting, whether it's during rifle season or deer hunting at rifle season or archery season. And I remember my buddies saying, hey, when you're out there, be careful. If you see these things, this is what an illegal drug operation out there, drug grow out there looks like. But they showed me traps, what these booby traps look like, and like having fishing hooks hanging down that you couldn't see and catching it right in the eye and stuff like that. And it is an issue. And you got people camping out there, they got weapons, and they are going to protect their stuff as much as they can. And it's a real thing. And I didn't really think that in Deschutes, but that does make sense with 97 going up through there.
Mm-hmm. So this is another story, and this was recent in 2025 April. So here we go. We've got our drug trafficking bust, and it's 46 arrests, and shows the beginning of the Sonora cartel activity in Portland. And so we can see this huge collection of fentanyl, pills, guns, and 22 pounds of meth, 9 pounds of cocaine, 2 pounds of heroin. So what I don't know, if this was instrumental in collecting evidence that led to the next arrest that came along.
In Salem?
Yeah.
I would say it is, because they do wiretaps. They have all these things. And so they start picking off the lower members of the drug cartel, the mules, you would call them. They pick those off first, and then they start building that case up. And when they do that, they're able to kind of track back, and they're just building the case to get the higher level of people in the organization. But there's things there that I see on that when you talk about 2 pounds of heroin. Heroin used to be a thing, and now it wasn't because of fentanyl. I'm surprised to see cocaine at 9 pounds, because cocaine, when you had crack cocaine in the 80s or the 90s and early 2000s, it was an easy way, cheap high. They figured out how to cut it and stuff. But I see cocaine getting more and more visibility in the drug world again. And it's just baffling, because it used to be, I remember when I was growing up, people that had cocaine, it was like the rich person drug because it was expensive to have.
Cocaine's like marijuana now. Can we talk about the 44 pounds of fentanyl? That is so much.
Yeah.
44 pounds. That's like
That'll make 9.9 million pills.
That's
what that
like
would make.
it's like you if you were made of fentanyl. That's just
44 pounds?
yeah. You're about 44 pounds.
Just because I push away from the table and you,
You gotta-
don't.
you gotta hit the gym again, man.
Your pasta eating thing's showing here on you. All right,
is.
sorry.
Sorry,
yeah.
I don't mean to keep derailing us, but
Oh, no, I'll fire back at you.
44 pounds of fentanyl seems like
That's
a
huge.
ton.
Yeah.
Like we always, do the statistics on how many people like a pound of fentanyl can kill. So 44 pounds, again, if we had a Jamie or something like that from Joe Rogan, we could have someone Google that for us, but I'd be very curious to know that. Put it in the show notes.
Show notes.
44
Show
pounds.
notes.
Thank you,
I do
Ben.
44 pounds will make around 9 million pills.
Wow.
9 million, because the way they cut it, and that's why I want a pill press to be illegal, but it's getting held up in a committee. Oh, it wasn't part of the 4002 ordeal. And come on, chair, knock it off. This is an important thing. And anyway,
Who's the chair of that committee? Name names. Let's throw some people under the bus here.
Hal, you can look at it on the Oregon O.G.E to see who the chair of the House Judiciary is.
Well, and this goes back even to 24. So this Ford charged with hauling over a ton of Mexican drug cartel heroin in Oregon. And so I thought it was interesting to your perspective as the drugs have changed over the years and which ones kind of ebb and flow in popularity. But they located and seized 8 55-gallon barrels.
I remember that.
Approximately 370 gallons of liquid narcotic inside the moving truck, and 2 loaded handguns inside a motel room.
That was out in Hillsboro. They made that bust. That was when we were right in the thick of Measure 110 reform in short session.
What's a liquid narcotic? Is that like the base to make meth or something like that? Or
No,
is that
that's liquid
actual
heroin.
liquid heroin.
Liquid heroin, and they will process it differently. They make
370 gallons.
yes, 370 gallons.
God,
55 gallons. Just think of that.
that's insane.
Yeah, and heroin is an opioid, obviously, and that was I remember with the drugs and the enforcement. Once you went from marijuana, cocaine, then when you started hitting either crank or meth at the time, and then heroin was kind of like the last stop. That was the last stop for drugs. Intravenous drug users ended up getting, they get hepatitis or any other communicable disease and stuff like that. And that was kind of the last roll. And then they came into, it was when meth, the super labs were there, they went away because, Kim, you were in the legislature when they put pseudoephedrine behind the counter, right? Mm-hmm. I will tell you, I laughed. As a sergeant in charge at East Precinct, what do these lawmakers think they're doing? That is the dumbest thing I ever heard of. I mean, this ain't going to help anything because we would get mobile meth labs in the back of cars all the time.
And it wasn't just behind the counter, it was prescription.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who cares about that when they've got 55-gallon barrels coming across in U-Hauls? I mean, like, geez.
What I'm getting at is the reason why the mom and pop meth labs kind of went away, and then these drug houses went away. These where they would make the drugs was because of that law. This is where actually
the Smurfs were put out of business.
Yeah, they got put out of business because somebody had an idea, and I was like, this ain't gonna work, and it did. Once that law took effect, I wasn't getting calls from my officers to have the hazmat team come out to get all these beakers of flammable all these bad materials that would cause cancer, could kill you on the spot. It changed, and then they had the super labs that go down to
Well, yeah, I was just
Mexico.
going to say that's again emblematic of the state legislature killing small business right here in Oregon.
Yeah, that's one business I'm willing to get rid of.
That's right.
That is one business I am willing to champion, get rid of because they don't pay taxes.
Yeah.
Oh, is that why?
It kills people. It's horrible, right? So.
Well, this goes back to Deschutes one. This was a giant illegal marijuana grow, 30-acre illegal marijuana operation that was grown, and team seized nearly 10,000 plants, 2,800 pounds of processed marijuana, a couple pistols, an AR, and this goes to kind of a point I think you were talking about earlier when with our new Homeland Secretary of Homeland Security, and how when they go in and arrest migrant workers.
Tom Homan did an interview on the Sean Ryan show, and what we were talking about it earlier, and his story was, all these sanctuary states, they don't allow ICE to come in and arrest people in the jails or in the prisons or when they get released So then ICE has to go and find them in the community. And therefore, when they raid someone, not only is it a high-risk arrest, usually on the street or in a home, but if they raid a home and they find other illegal immigrants in that home, they will also deport them.
Right.
So it's also increasing the amount of people. If you're a sanctuary state and you want to save illegal immigrants and keep them in the state, allowing ICE to come into people's homes and on neighborhoods and arrest people en masse is probably something you would disagree with. And yet that's what ICE is forced to do because of our own sanctuary state policies.
And the sanctuary city, even though we're a sanctuary state, these cities seem to have to come out, well, we're going to be a sanctuary city. Like, do you realize what you're doing and how you're hurting our communities and the destruction that you're bringing into when you have these criminals that are doing these bad things that we don't need in our country and they shouldn't be
It's all about
here?
virtue signaling. Has nothing to do with it. Just got a virtue signal to their base.
I don't understand that. I don't get how we don't. I don't understand why our colleagues across the side of the aisle or whoever it is, whatever special interest groups, why don't we want to keep our community safe? I want my community safe for my kids to grow up. I want everybody's kids to be safe. But these policies are just some bad policies.
Yeah, see, you're asking the wrong people here. We should have a Democrat on and just gang up on them.
No, but Kim, you kind of talk through what you've seen in the legislature, how this has kind of evolved since you've been in the state legislature.
Well, for instance, we used to have shall issue for getting a concealed handgun license, and that has changed to now you have to go get a permit, just even purchase a gun, and those types of things have changed greatly. I used to be able to get Democrats to be able to sign on to some of my pro-gun legislation, like reciprocity or things like that, and no more. That kind of came to a sudden stop about 2009.
So when did you enter the legislature?
2005 was my first year.
Okay.
Obviously in the House, but
Yeah.
they constantly don't get the fact that criminals don't obey the laws. Like I'm reading the two pistols and the AR-15 rifle were also seized. I'm sure they were completely legally obtained, because criminals always obey the law.
Are you saying the same criminals that had almost 10,000 plants of marijuana don't care if they break a gun law or two along the way?
I've heard, yeah.
Wow,
that they're kind of
fascinating.
Huh.
Who would have thought?
I thought they were all angels.
Outlaws.
They're just trying to make $1. Right? No, I just don't get it sometimes, and I can see certain things, but it's legal to grow marijuana in Oregon. Now they have to have illegal operations. Oh yeah, they're trying to undercut the legal operations. Yeah.
Well, and so we've hinted at this one earlier, but this was the infamous arrest not too long ago of the cartel leaders in Salem, and I believe a couple of remonstrances were made about this issue. But it's a pretty significant statewide, multi-statewide arrest and collection of resources and drugs and cash seized. And my understanding is, I remember of the $5 million in cash seized in this multi-state arrest, 2.8 million of it was just in Salem.
Yep. And they had two cars. They had a really nice a Raptor pickup and then another one. That's where they hide their money at. That's where they can just kind of money laundry and just go buy cars and stuff like that and just kind of keep the money tied up that way. And it's incredible.
Well, on the gun issue, though, what I don't really understand is, the Democrats are always trying to pass these terrible gun laws. But I did a remonstrance today on an illegal immigrant who, abused his girlfriend, got released, and then was found with 2 firearms. And I think he got out with like $750 bail or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. Why are we passing all these gun laws if we're not enforcing the laws that we already have on the books? I mean, this guy, he'll probably be out in like 6 months or something like that, unless he's charged federally. I just don't see Oregon being tough on crime, and yet we pass all these gun laws that we then choose not to enforce for the illegal immigrants that come into this country and break our laws. But God forbid a Republican have a gun that's not quite legal. They'll throw the book at them.
It kills me too on this arrest, this latest biggest bust in DEA history. The remonstrances on the floor from the other side of the aisle focused around not the fentanyl that could kill millions of people at the lethal dose for most was considered, I think, 2 milligrams. but they focused on the rapid firing devices that were found. I'm like, okay. So making these illegal will, I'm sure, stop any of those people from getting them, right?
Well, I guarantee you the fentanyl that this guy had has killed more people than his rapid fire device.
Exactly.
It's obscene.
Millions of people.
So we haven't seen a big shootout with these cartels with the police. I mean, the one big shootout that really stands out in my mind when I was in law enforcement was the LA shootout, the bank robbers that were going systematically. They had body armor. They knew what they were doing.
I've watched a lot of documentaries on that.
That was a thing. I mean, and the officers were ill equipped, so they got, they figured out what they needed to do and changed law enforcement. But I don't get why our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so hung up on trying to punish law-abiding citizens and making us wait and do these regulations that are inhibiting our Second Amendment. I don't understand their thought process. They'll use school shootings. They'll use anything they can to say this is why it's going to make it safer, but it doesn't. It does not do that.
Well, and if you want to follow that logic all the way through, we don't have to look very far. I mean, Europe has banned firearms in their entire continent for a long, long time. And the terrorists in Europe, they occasionally do get firearms, but what they've gone to is bombs. And then bombs, turns out, are, expensive, a little complicated. Sometimes you blow yourself up. So what they've started doing now is just renting vehicles and driving them into crowds.
Yeah.
So they will always find a way. And frankly, I would much rather be in a shooting event where I can potentially shoot back or run than get blown up by a bomb, which there's no defense for, or get run over by a car, which can happen anytime, any place, just about.
Oh, our homegrown terrorists back in the Boston bombing during the marathon, pressure cookers and all that stuff like that, horrible. I mean, if there's a will, there's a way. And so we're going to de-arm our citizens, but yet these bad guys can figure out a different way of going about and causing harm and destruction. I mean, cars, Europe or in England, it was knives, going on knives, slashing, stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay, we're getting off track, but
now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the experience of public safety and TriMet. And on our slide here, I've thrown up a couple of stories with public safety and TriMet. So experiences of firing shots and barricading yourself on buses in TriMet. There's a stalker that accosted 31 victims through TriMet. There's the platform shootings and there's shoving people in front of TriMet. There's the infamous tale not that long ago of, was it over 98% of the surface areas in TriMet have traces of either fecal matter or drugs. Mm-hmm. So,
wow, I wonder why people don't ride TriMet more.
Yeah, we want to fund them through a transportation package, but that's a different story. So one of the things I don't talk about a lot in my tenure with the Bureau, I spent 5 years in the transit division. So the Portland Police Bureau was contracted by the TriMet to provide police services. And anywhere you had the Max line intersecting with bus routes, East Multnomah County into downtown Portland, the different platforms we'd do drug arrests, or at a bus stop. So dating myself back in the day, there was always these complaints in inner North Portland where people were hanging out selling drugs by a bus stop. And so I set up some, just observation things and watching. And the reason why they did was early in the 90s, they didn't have cell phones. They had pagers. And there was a payphone next to the bus stop. And it took forever and a day because we kept getting complaint after complaint after complaint about this bus stop. I'm like, well, let's just take it away and the drug dealers won't be in this bus stop because we're trying to catch them with drugs. And TriMet, their bureaucracy, oh no, grandma's going to need to be get out of the rain, all these things, all these excuses trying to be nice for the ridership during the daytime. Well, it's the same people that want to be in the bus stop, they can't because they got the drug dealer there. So I asked, what would it take to just move that bus stop down a block away from the payphone? Oh no, we can't do the stop spacing. This, and I said, are you kidding me? I argued till blue in the face. And I threatened to go get my own tool set and just move it down there myself. They did. And I said, prove me wrong that it's not going to work. And it did. But transit, because they're not hardened, There's no fair checks. They've taken all the ability away from law enforcement on that because of our anti-police movement that happened just a few years ago. And those tools that are there, they don't want law enforcement enforcing any of the laws. But if you look at like Atlanta and Marta out there, Marta, I think it's Marta in Atlanta, they hardened all those shelters. They hardened everything along the max line or their rail lines, which means you have to buy a ticket first before you get on there. And there's like a screening process to get there. Then their crime rate plummeted. But the New York subways, not as much.
This just goes back to enforcing
right.
the law,
The
period. No matter if it's on TriMet or anywhere else. I mean,
but it's hard enforcing the TriMet in the sense that everything's open, you can walk in and out, no big deal, and the fair inspections because they took that tool away.
Just close TriMet, make people drive. We're Americans.
No, all right. Well.
Yeah,
problem solved. Doge first cut TriMet.
There we go. Well, we've seen
that's Metro, man. So
yeah, this tale. Like you talked about, not a lot of people riding TriMet. 82% of, roughly half of the riders feel unsafe, and 82% say it's other riders' behavior. You can see that from all the tales that have made it onto ones with attacks, stabbings, knives over and over again. So, and I think it touched to your point, Representative, about hardening it and making sure that's a safe, accessible place, and you see those crime rates go down. But certainly also you've talked about mental health. I think, Senator, when you mentioned that.
Yeah. So what TriMet did, if you were a law enforcement officer to help safety, if you were off duty, you could ride the train free. You just had to show your ID. And the hope was you would interact, you would intervene if there was a thing that you needed to do. And most police officers, like, you don't have all your tools with you. You might have your gun with you. But you don't have your vest, you don't have gloves, you don't have handcuffs, all these things that you'd want to intervene in a moment in time to actually, one, be safe, but two, actually affect an arrest. And I remember riding when I was working nights, lived out in East Portland, and go to the Max stop and ride in the Max, and packed full of people. But I didn't like it because it was trying to wait, half an hour, whatever, 45 minutes till the next Max train. If you missed, it was like sitting around twiddling your thumbs in downtown Portland, trying to get back home to go to sleep because you're in the middle of working night shift. But yeah, I people don't ride the buses because it doesn't feel safe.
I used to ride the Max when it was first built.
Yeah,
Gateway was the place that was close by. I would go down there and catch it to my doctor's appointment at Lloyd Center. I mean, that's I wouldn't do that now.
No.
I would not do that now.
I want to take my kids on the Max just to go to the zoo station to see the underground. I don't want them to get anywhere near Pioneer Square because I don't feel safe for them.
Well, I'm talking again, since we're Doge podcast, they get like half of all transit funding for the state of Oregon.
58% was the figures I think we
That's
saw
more than
today.
half. Yeah, I mean, that's insane. And
It's like 39
for
million.
it being a failure and the amount of millions of dollars they get, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but yeah, it's a astronomical amount of money for it being such a colossal failure.
I think you're supposed to call it disproportionate impact.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm new. Disproportionate impact when it comes to funding, and I mean it's
Use your special words.
yeah. I'm working on it.
Well, and so here is a really interesting slide. It's a little nitty gritty, but it shows Portland and its crime rates, and it even breaks it out by neighborhood. And our first one to the left here, this has March from 2023 to March of 24. And so you can see the total number of different types of offenses and crimes. So you have person crimes, which include assault, homicide, human trafficking, kidnapping, sex offenses. There was almost 11,000 of them over a year-long period in March last year. 10,891
For person crimes, right?
For person crimes. Yep. If property crimes are 54,571, and a little over 1,800 for society ones. So next, then the following year, you see another shift. You have a slight decrease in person crimes, about 10,600. And then you see property crimes, they drop a little bit. They're just shy of 50,000, about 49,000. But society crimes go up. They're about almost 2,300. So, but a pretty steady number. And, you know, there's a scary, horrifying number of those crimes. I mean, homicide rates, human trafficking, kidnapping, the sex offenses are staggeringly and disturbingly high. And then, you know, you can see on the map as well the breakout in the neighborhoods with the higher rates based on the color of them. It's a great tool online that you can find. So finding monthly neighborhood offense statistics from the Portland Police Bureau, and encourage anyone curious about more detail of it to go check it out.
So I want to add, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and you did mean color of the map, not color of the neighborhood.
Color of the map.
Okay,
Absolutely.
just wanna make
Yes.
sure.
Absolutely
Whoa,
is the
whoa.
color of the map. The shading in the map, as you can see, broken out.
Sure, there's no
certainly.
misunderstanding.
Shading of the
Blue.
map.
There's a lot of blue.
Yes.
What? No. So the pub subcommittee, we watch or have all the budgets come through, and Oregon Public Defense Commission had their budget, and DA Barton came in and DA Vasquez came into my office. We started talking. I know both of them, and they said, "Hey, read this commission book and I think it was their 5-year plan. Their 5-year plan, if you go to a couple pages in, talks about decriminalizing some property crimes, all these what they would call low-level crimes, larceny, motor vehicle theft. I mean, there's a bunch of them on there. And then you flip the page over, and they talk about, we have somebody in our chamber in the House, Representative Kevin Mannix, that champion Measure 11, mandatory minimum sentences, Measure 11 crimes. And in that, they wanted to take the second-degree murder, second-degree sex assault, take all that out of that sentencing guidelines. And basically, it is the problem because we can't hire enough public defenders. Well, wait a minute. You can't manage all the money we're giving you. We keep giving you more and more money. You can't figure it out. That's the problem. That's where we need to have an audit of that. No, we just want to make these things not crimes in nature, and so we don't have to worry about hurting these people. I mean, there was one in there. We talked about theft. If you stole theft for substance for survival, you couldn't be charged. They didn't want you charged with a crime. It's like, are you kidding me?
But you don't understand.
I understand completely.
If they get rid of the crimes, then it helps their statistics,
And
and
then they
then
don't
the
have to
crime rate
defend
is now lower because they're not a crime anymore.
The DA on the stand, I had a video and I pulled the clip of it, but I said, so what you're telling me is you're getting pressure not to file charges. He goes, absolutely. I said, that's ridiculous. Who's doing that? And he kind of named it off and he said where it was at. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. The DAs are getting pressure not to file charges so it can relieve the system for the public defense crisis. I don't know if you've noticed, everything's a crisis right now, right?
Yes, everything.
I just don't understand how you can look at those numbers, look at that map, and all the legislators that are from the Portland area think, yes, we should export this policy to the rest of the state.
And if you look at clear on the right side of that, that dark blue one that looks like there's division, and then there's, I think it's going to be
Is that your neighborhood?
Burnside. That's where I used to patrol a lot.
Yeah.
I was out there. But that's, if you look along, and they're going to not like me when I say this, but the max line, there's these hot spots where all the crime happens along the hot spots. 162 in Burnside is a volcano of hot spots and crimes. I remember rolling through there one time and got in the middle of a shootout between two gang members, two rival gangs in their bullet. I'm like, what is going on?
Did you try to stop it or just let it slide?
It was me, and I got caught in the crossfire and got out of there because I didn't know where the shots were coming from until I got all the officers, the resources we needed there to converge and go put some order back into the lawlessness that was going on.
Isn't that about the time when Gresham became a crime haven? It's right after the max line was put in, and they were importing all the gangbangers from Portland into Gresham.
So what happened was in northeast Portland with the gentrification, people got pushed out of the housing there, and there was a lot of people that were gang members and had that, and they called it, hey, had to move out in the numbers. So they moved out in the numbers out off of Gleason, off of Burnside, off of Division, off of Halsey, all those. So they called it moving out in the digits out there, the numbers. And that was a trend that you saw that pushed it out to Gresham, the crime, the gang related to drugs and all that stuff. That's what really exported from one area, and it went out to another area.
I used to live off Gleason, so I was right there.
Right there.
But yeah.
I'm pretty sure you know where I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, this one had some occurrences. So Governor Brown, Oregon's last governor, set some pretty significant records and granted clemency to over 1,200 criminals, convicted criminals, and 17 of them were from Oregon's death row. And there was I'm sure you all remember.
That's
a lot
ridiculous.
of controversy.
I remember, them not telling the families. I mean, how would that just pisses me off more than anything else? If your family member was murdered by someone and they get released by the governor, granted clemency by the governor, and you're not even aware of it until it has already happened. You can't petition. You can't do anything about it. I mean, that's absolutely criminal. I mean,
soft on crime policies is causing the decline of Oregon, and you see all this stuff right there. Kim, I wasn't remember, but I heard, was there somebody in Senate Judiciary that was giving testimony that may have been a violent offender? I got asked that question. Or maybe it was something else. It was another committee.
Recently? Or I'm not.
I thought it was recently, but maybe
sounds like something that would happen. I'll go along with
I
it.
don't
Yes, it was in my committee, Jeff.
recall.
No, there was one. I just can't remember what it
that.
was.
But around the COVID time when they were trying to release pressure, and that was kind of part of what Kate Brown was doing, I think. I don't know. At least that was part of the excuse to try to decrease the population because of the COVID and the spacing. They just couldn't handle it. And so they made determinations that certain people did not any longer pose a public safety threat. Never mind what they did. Never mind what their punishment should be. There should be, punishment as well as being a safety threat. It should be a balance between. That's why we have Measure 11, because that was not being equally looked at with the judges. They would let people out with a hand slap, and people forget why Measure 11 came into place anyway. But I don't remember that unless it was somebody who actually was innocent. I am actually for people who been accused of heinous things, but actually end up not having been
different subject. I mean,
done the crime.
But I know, like there was groups that come in that have graduated these drug courts or gotten their life straight after these bad crimes, and that we're not talking about those people that have done the right things, figured out their problems, and sought help and got there and became productive members in society. These are people that are just in jail. Time to go. You're okay.
Yep. Yeah. And tragedy to this follow-up was one of the commuted sentences who had been deemed not a security risk, was still a security risk, and went on tragically to murder 4 people. And I just remember being so devastated and frustrated. I have a personal friend, actually. It was one of the best things I got to work on when I worked for Senator Knope was Kaylee's Law. And she was a personal friend of mine, went to high school together, and she was abducted and assaulted and murdered by a campus security officer. And
I remember that.
Yeah. And then he fled the state, and it led to a multi-state manhunt, and he murdered and harmed other people on the way. And it turned out this officer, he wasn't an officer, but he had failed psych evaluation tests, and he was placed in a position of trust as a security officer with all the tools roughly of law enforcement except a gun, and had that kind of control. And actually, one of the tip-offs that ended up getting the chase that led on him was his wife found Kaylee's purse in their garage, and she was a law enforcement officer. Oh. And so she stepped up and did the right thing. And just a tragic scenario where, if systems worked, government efficiency, you wouldn't have that.
Yeah, the system's broken.
I just don't understand how the Democrats get to be the party of empathy and compassion when they do shit like this. It makes me so mad.
Yeah.
Tell us how you really feel, Alec.
Oh, you don't want me to go there. That was me being polite, Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. But definitely. So, and now we get to some other types of lawlessness that were mentioned earlier. But we all can remember back during the Antifa riots in Portland and the times that they multiple times tried to set fire to the federal courthouse. We have one story published July of 2020, another one following up March of 2021. And if I remember right, Rep, you've got a story about an experience with Antifa.
Yeah. So I want to talk what's on the slide right there first. So your slide on the left is the Justice Center in downtown Portland. and that was Central Precinct. And the first floor is Central Precinct, and the basement's Central. But in the basement is a satellite port, which goes to Multnomah County Detention Facility, and then floors 3 through 9 or whatever it is a jail in that building, and then above that is the rest of the bureau's administrative offices. During that time frame, people broke into the jail or broke into Central Precinct and set fire to it. And so you couldn't get fire trucks in, you couldn't do all these things. And people that were in custody, waiting trial or serving their time, there was no way to get them out because of the riots and all that stuff. So not only did they break the law, then you have somebody else that's in there trying to set the place on fire. And if that place would have gone up, it's a cement building, but stuff still can burn. That would have been horrific. And that's just kind of, these protesters don't know what they're doing. They just, we can burn. They just get this mob mentality. And then, the next one over there, that fencing right there is in front of the federal courthouse, and watching all that. And it is sad. I mean, I rode horses, and we took care of protesters. I went on mountain bikes, and I did all the different things with the riot control team and all those things. And to let the leadership in Portland let that happen, because it was the wave of what's going on. People have to let their steam off. That was the poorest decision a mayor has ever made. And when he went out there during that riot and said, "I hear you, I'm with you," having his George Bush 9/11 moment, and then he catches a whiff of CS gas, and then all of a sudden he starts getting harassed when he's trying to go out to dinner and stuff like that. That was the poorest leadership I've ever seen, and that demoralized a city and set that place into chaos. If he wouldn't have allowed politicizing of law enforcement by telling them not to do their job and allowed them to do their job and clean it up like they did in Boston, like they had like 2 days of it and they were done, Portland would be in a different place right now. Poor leadership.
Yeah, this went on for like a year, right?
It was
a
100 days
time.
straight of dumpster fires, of riots, officers getting hurt. 100 days.
Any of those people get arrested?
They got arrested, but what emboldened them was the Schmidt show. The DA said, "Oh, I'm not going to prosecute these crimes."
That's what happened.
That's what emboldened them to do that. "Oh, I'm not going to do that." On my other podcast I had he was upstairs. You met him, Billy Williams, Oregon's U.S. Attorney for the District of Oregon, and we talked about this whole thing. And I had actually another one. I had the former special agent in charge of the FBI, and we talked about this on a couple of my episodes, and just the amount of destruction that happened and the lack of allowing police officers to go do their job because of poor leadership. Anyway, okay, so you talked about Antifa. So we went to an event. We were, I think, at the Oregon Day dinner in that year, and it was in 20. And we came back, and everything was closed down. Brown had closed stuff down. My wife and I have like a date night. I said, it sounds weird, hon, but I just kind of want to drive off of the freeway and just kind of drive by and see what the court justice center looks like in the courthouse, just kind of an arm's length away. Okay. She said, "All right, that's fine." Kind of on our way home, and we're in my diesel pickup, and we get off, and we're driving along. Second, third, fourth is going that way, and these Antifa people start looking up at my pickup. What is this about? And they start looking, and my spidey senses. I'd been out of law enforcement for a few years.
Diesel pickup, dead giveaway. You're a Republican. I mean, my goodness.
Well,
what were you thinking?
There's part of that, but what I didn't know is these guys had
Blue Lives Matter sticker on the back.
Nope, none of that. The motorcycles kind of started surrounding us. Got to a stoplight, then we turned to the right, and these people start looking in the bed, and my spidey senses went off. I didn't have my gun with me or anything like that. I'm like, we need to get out of here. And I told Shauna, if they surround us and they start beating on the truck, I'm just going to drive this way. If somebody's in front of the truck, they shouldn't have been there, and then we'll get the police and get away from this scene. What I later found out was the Proud Boys and the counter protesters would be in the back of pickups, and they had paintball guns, and they'd come up there and do the paintball thing on it, shoot them with these paintballs and stuff like that. So that's what they were checking out. And I'm like, but it was no idea. Didn't know.
Mad Max out there.
That's what Beyond Thunderdome is exactly what it was. It's like, goodness gracious.
Yeah.
That was the story you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So that's the end of our slideshow. But I wanted to say I really appreciate y'all come back, and I'd be curious to hear any other closing thoughts for you guys had about where Oregon's at with public safety, where we could do better.
I think I'll jump into this one real quick with public safety and law enforcement, but the sanctuary cities and states. I understand why they did it, not using resources. They thought they were doing the right thing, but right now you're watching across the nation that people got let into this country that are bad people. We're not talking the person that just wants to come and get a better life and get their kid. We're not talking them. We're talking about bad people that have committed horrendous crimes against children, crimes against women, death, and all these things. But there's the Make California Golden Again, I think is what it was called. And I listened to it on a podcast this morning in my workout. And the U.S. attorney for the District of California is now, they've grabbed all of the law enforcement agencies, DEA, ATF, FBI, all the agencies, Homeland Security, and they are going through everybody that's in custody. And if any of those people have illegal entry back into America, what they are now doing, the Gavin Newsom and all their things, they're unable to shield them with their sanctuary laws because they now have federal warrants for the arrest of these people. And when they go to the detention facility, here's the federal warrant, and you cannot obstruct that. If you do, that is you are going to get on the wrong side of that. So they've changed tactics. They figured a different way to get out there and get business done. And I am so proud of what they're doing and getting stuff out of here. So that's where I'm at. Alec, what do you want to close out on this one?
I'm like you just mentioned, I'm really happy with some of the measures the Trump administration is taking to start on solving this problem. It's such a huge issue. I don't think it'll get done during the Trump administration, but I appreciate us moving in the right direction for the first time in a long time. But Oregon, unfortunately, isn't. I mean, we just talked about, the riots of 2020 and all the illegal immigration and all the crimes since then. And we still have soft on crime policies. I feel like we're the only state that hasn't learned that lesson yet. Even California, for how terrible and liberal they are, they're starting to move in the right direction of being more tough on crime. And you think maybe there's a chance that they've started to learn their lesson. Whereas Oregon, I don't even think we're getting a hint of it yet. It just makes me sad because I think that things have to get worse before they get better. And I'm convinced things in Oregon will get worse. And that's sad and not a good place to be. But we need to fight back every chance we get and continue to draw a contrast with the Democrats so that we can show people, hey, we are different. We don't believe in all this garbage that they stand for. And this is what we believe. And this is why it's better. And that's why we are the solution to this terrible problem and this just malaise that's all over the state of Oregon, from crime to business and everything else in between.
Kim?
Amen to all that. But I also think that there is an attitude shift amongst the population, our constituents, and there has to be a critical mass to get the politicians to actually follow along and do the right thing. But right now, we don't have that leadership in Salem. But I do think I see a shift in people's attitudes. Wait a minute. Why are we taking away cops? Why are we defunding cops? We need more of them. We may need to, adjust this or that. But overall, I think there's a better attitude on the populace that we need to improve our public safety.
I agree with all those things. And when we took on the challenge of reforming Measure 110 and we put our bill out as Republicans, and then the negotiation started for 4002 when we recriminalized drugs. I don't know if we'd have been able to get there if it wasn't because of the public opinion of that. Mm-hmm. And the sad thing, that was during the election cycle. Elections were coming up. And was it because they saw their polling numbers and it was horrible?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would hope it wasn't, but I think there was some of that in play. There really was.
Absolutely.
And it's like, come on, this was a bad idea to begin with, and it's just bad. And when you have a state that's 47th in the nation because they can't figure out how to spend the money right and get the help that needs to be there, instead of going to these nonprofits, these non-NGOs, they're collecting this money, and then their boards get X amount of dollars for being on the board and stuff like that. I mean, that's what we're talking about when it comes to this Oregon efficiency, the state of Oregon. That's what this podcast is about, to recognize and show these things, public defense crisis or mental health or lack of law enforcement and all these things where they're spending their money at where it's not using it wisely. So, Ben, you get to close out the last of it.
Oh, I just appreciate everybody being here.
No, you've been a staffer. You get
Yes.
a chance to. You've been a staffer in the building. You've been around the block a couple times.
Yeah.
As a staff at the staff level, you see things differently than we as the electeds. So, what have you seen, and kind of your thoughts on some of this?
Yeah, I think you see a lot of people changing their behavior. You know, I can say for young people, anecdotal example, but a friend who's got a sister who's a nurse up in Portland, and she's a little, center left leaning, probably not someone who would typically do this, but because of how the riots happened and the lack of safety that she felt, she went and got a concealed carry permit. And when she goes to work, she would protect herself with that. And she felt much more secure in that. And I think that goes to the point you made, Senator, that there's a change happening in confidence. And I think, I hear this a lot from, people with military law enforcement experience. Public safety does start as an individual. It's our responsibility first. Now, that doesn't remove the responsibility of the government to do a good job, but you have to be realistic. And, I'm blessed to have a kid on the way. It's going to be my first kid, but I'm, understand the state he lives in and the public safety situation in it. And I'm going to make dang sure that he is safe.
Yeah. When you hold your child for the first time, they cry and you look at them, it is life-changing.
It's indescribable.
And that's what we do this for, is for the future. And with that, Oregon, come back to the next episode, because you're going to get live what was really happening in Salem right here. We're trying to change this ship and change course a little bit. So till the next episode, have a good night.